Well, thank you very much, Diana and Sylvia, and it's great to be here, co-sponsored by USAID and 2Blades, and we're delighted to be part of this. And I guess we want this to be a conversation, and we have an incredible group of colleagues here who I think will lead us in that conversation, but hopefully we can do this in a way that there's time for questions and input from the audience. I just want to set the stage before we start a little bit. A few weeks ago, I had the pleasure, but that's an interesting word, of being part of the launch of the Global Agricultural Productivity Report from Virginia Tech University in Washington, D.C. And I can tell you it is a very sobering situation that we're looking at. We're looking at negative productivity growth, total factor productivity growth in North America. We are looking at almost flat total factor productivity growth in Africa, where so much depends on making agriculture more productive and making food more affordable and helping drive pro-poor economic growth. And then we had some bright spots. South Asia, where we saw that investment, public and private, in agricultural innovation, agricultural research, which is what we're going to be talking about tonight, is moving the needle. Same thing in Brazil. So we know that there's some bright spots, but we're not doing enough in a number of different places in the world. And I guess the situation, to just put another, it's not a sustainable situation. Most of the food increase, production increase in Africa is coming from land extensification, plowing up, cutting down trees, plowing up hillsides, draining wetlands. None of this is particularly sustainable. And especially in a climate-challenged world, it's distinctly not climate smart. So what do we mean by total factor productivity? Better genetics, less burden of disease, greater resource use efficiency, better decision-making empowered by better knowledge, better information. And if we put all those things together, what do we get? We get green growth, which is what the world needs at this point. We can't keep cutting down forests and draining wetlands and plowing non-sustainably on hillsides. So this is where the critical role of science and innovation comes in, but it's also about how we do that science and innovation and how these innovation chains, agricultural innovation chains, which is the theme of our discussion tonight, how they operate. And I can't think of a better group of people than my colleagues here to really dig in into what and how we do what we must do. So I'll just very briefly introduce the panel, but I'd like you to refer to your brochure that you have, and there you'll see their bios. So I'm not going to give a long introduction, but please do avail yourself of that. So alphabetically, starting with last names, we'll begin with Marc Ghislain. Marc has been working on delivering late blight resistant potatoes to smallholders for many years with great success. And I also want to just give him a shout out because he's leveraging the genome of Solanum to do this in ways that I think are very exciting. Second, we have Margaret Karembu, who comes all the way to us from Kenya. And I should say Marc is with the International Potato Center. Margaret is with the International Service for the Acquisition of Agrobiotech Applications. Thank you. I know how to say ISAAA. I just struggled with the, I did practice that and it didn't take. Very, very engaged in the power of communications, which is a big part of the how that I refer to. Then we have Stella Salvo from Bayer, whom I've had the great privilege of working closely with for a number of years. And I think Stella is going to bring us a dimension about the role of the private sector and the efficiencies offered there but she's also focused on smallholders. And of course, that's the sweet spot for USAID and for many of us who are focused on reducing extreme poverty and malnutrition and environmental degradation, increasing climate resilience. And then Sofia Tesfazion from the African Agricultural Technology Foundation, which I know very well, so I shouldn't have to struggle to say that. I think, Sofia, your organization is all about stewardship and access. So she's going to bring us, I think, local insights from the ground into how innovations in agriculture, especially ones using cutting-edge science, are moving forward in Africa. And particularly, I know you'll be talking a bit about telomeres. And then finally, Kamil Witek. And Kamil is with 2Blades, but he's based at the Sainsbury Labs in the United Kingdom. And I think in terms of the how here, Kamil's going to help us think through some of the ingenious strategies for looking at different contexts in terms of markets and the farmers that benefit from those markets and the communities that are served. So I don't have a set of questions here, but I think I'd like to invite you to think about, what is it in the how that in the work that each of you does that that really helps us move forward on these objectives around improving global food security and nutrition. It can be anything from gender to better information to partnerships, especially, I think, partnerships. So who would like to go first? I don't have a speaking order here, so somebody needs to be brave. So I'm gonna pick on you, Marc.
Yeah. So yes, I think one of the questions is how to bring more efficiency in our system. The labelite biotech potato is a typical example of partnership in which SIP has been the original developer of the technology, doing all the research with partnership with some organization, but we were the main drivers. Then after that, the development phase was mainly driven by the National Agricultural Research Program. In Kenya, it's CalRO. In Uganda, it's NARO. In other countries, it's always an agency from the government. And then the last phase, which hasn't started yet, but which we're working on, is really a partnership with the private sector, the seed growers, because we all know the seed growers have a key role to play in the adoption of new potato varieties, even though the seeds, certified seeds that they produce only account for 1 to maximum 3% of the total seed planted. But their role is fundamental in the initial phase for deployment of the technology. So I think the efficiency from the private sector is certainly going to come at the final stage when we want to deploy the technology. But I want also to mention that something that needs to change, would really improve the way we do business, is to adopt a more formal product life cycle, PLC. This is something in the public sector that we have not really completely adopted. This is something which comes, it's a framework that is part of any business, any private company is using this. And this is something that we should adopt one way or another. We should adjust to our reality, of course, but it would help us to make better decisions as to when we need this particular information to make the right decision to move to the next step, and not jumping into development when you have not finished all the research, which is a typical mistake of the public sector that we do all on and on. So I think these are the two elements of that are really important to bring in from the private sector, the PLC and the role of the seed growers. I would stop here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marc, and I'm glad you mentioned the product life cycle. That's something that USAID, we've tried to really learn from the private sector here. And really, that's a great deal about knowing who your user community is and involving them at an early stage, and then thinking about innovations in a life cycle, recognizing that they need to be replaced by newer innovations as they mature and as, to some degree, things like pathogens catch up to them. Very helpful. The other thing I wanted to flag is you mentioned the importance of engaging the seed system. That's that agricultural innovation chain, that ecosystem that really ensures that innovations reach smallholders. So, Margaret, Marc was talking about Kenya as the location for this work and how he's worked with different entities. And I wondered if you could share with us some insights into, how you see that evolving, what's working best, and what are the challenges that you think we need to keep front and center in our thinking?
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. And just speaking from where Marc has left about product development, understanding the ecosystem in which small-scale farmers can benefit from new innovations, at ISAAA-AfriCenter, we've been sharing knowledge on all aspects of modern biotechnology, starting from crops and animals. And now, of course, we are very excited that new crops, new products are coming that our policymakers, for example, our farmers are really, really waiting for. But it's good to have the best of products, but we lose out when that is miscommunicated, and that is where we come in, because we are suffering from this baggage of miscommunication and discommunication about new innovations, especially coming from the private sector. And then again, now when it comes to the public sector, we find the road is already very rough because of negative perceptions and the way private sector has been viewed for the longest period of time. And I think for us, when we started off 30 years ago in Africa, we started off communicating about products that our stakeholders were not very familiar with. So communicating a lot in the absence of products, real products, because we only had South Africa then, we had Egypt and Burkina Faso. But now, when we are seeing a new pipeline of products that are coming from this partnership between the public and private sector, it is exciting because now you talk about a product that is real. It's not hypothetical anymore. So having products and good products with farmers is very important when it comes to communication. The other aspect about delivering new innovations to farmers in Africa is about the policy, because the policy environment has not always been very predictable, and this reduces the level of investment from private sector, because you don't want to invest in an environment where you're not very sure whether this government system will support, and then the following the changeover, the transition, another government comes. And this has really been frustrating in the work that we have done in policy engagement, because you build champions in the governments, ministries, parliaments, because we need that support. We need the political support as well, but sustaining the political goodwill is really a big challenge in Africa when it comes to new innovations. And so again, just pointing to the fact that the more products we have coming from both the private and public sector, or even the stronger the partnerships are, so that the public sector can also deliver these products, it changes the whole landscape. And then you have our policymakers supporting the process. The third component is really about the aggressive activism against new innovations and anti-science behavior that is also, really penetrating in Africa, and a lot of misinterpretation of what really is sustainable agriculture. Because when it comes to systems like agroecology and then mixing that with the tools of supporting that agroecology sustainably, it is becoming difficult to communicate. And so again, private sector is very key, but the way we relate with the public sector and with the farmers is important, more so to share this kind of the victim narrative, the victim mentality that farmers are victims of private sector exploitation. This is something that we need to work very hard about, and the way to do it is to continue being persistent, insistent, consistent, and really trying to, as much as possible, build the trust that we require for products from both public and private sector to benefit our small-scale farmers. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Boy, you made so many good points there. The importance of communication, including good content of communication being so important. I heard a lot of P words, public-private partnerships, and one of the things that I thought you came up with there was you talked about the fact that we have so many concrete examples now of innovations that are really delivering benefits for people. So it's not abstract, and they're benefits for farmers. And what happens when that happens? You get demand-driven approaches from civil society. But the P's didn't stop there. We talked about the importance of policy, and then you talked about the importance of political support. And again, I think all of these things we've talked about, including that demand-driven aspect from farmers themselves, is critical on that. And then your last P was persistence. And I guess persistence is paying off, I hope. And I can't think of a better person to pass the baton to here than Sofia, who is also based in Nairobi, but like Margaret, works across the region. Sofia, the partnership word came in here. Partnership isn't very far from stewardship, which isn't very far from ownership, maybe, or a sense of ownership. And I wonder if you could, from your work at AATF, share with us a little bit more on the how, maybe citing some specific examples of where the context that Margaret described comes into play.
Yes, thanks, Rob. So first of all, this topic is really relevant for ATF. ATF was actually, started off 20 years ago to bridge the value of death in the innovation pathway. And, it's really where innovations potentially die. And ATF is there to support that bridge, really between science and research to the level of the farmer. So we've had 20 years of experience in terms of building PPPs to really look at technology, how it goes from the excellent technology and what it solves, which is, we say it's almost the easy part. Getting it to the farmer is the a real challenge. So you need to be persistent and think of it as a package. So we look at it, the technology needs to be, understandable, affordable, accessible. I'm coming with A's now, and really it needs to actually have a value. So we also look at it, and maybe that's also the efficiency of looking at it from a business point of view. It has to create value for it to be sustainable. From the farmer, from the agro-dealer, from the seed company, if we talk about seed technology. And that's complex in a context like Africa, and we have different countries. So we look also at the enabling environment, looking at the system approach, looking at the regulatory aspects and capacity along the value chain. And one example is also when we find, the one bottleneck is, for example, the foundation seed, which is really also in the cusp between the breeder and the research and actually getting it to commercial seed. If you don't get it right there in terms of quality, the whole chain has issues. So we have, for example, tested something that exists in the US and piloted in Africa. It's a for-profit company, B2B, servicing seed companies with quality foundation seeds so they can focus on marketing and getting it to the farmer. So so the idea is that it's going to take off, be sustainable, and just without any grant money or anything, service and a particular niche. So it's a complex. You need to, as you said, be persistent and not give up.
Thank you very much, Sofia. Of course, I love those A's. Affordable, accessible, available. They just don't come easily. No. I again, you hit on the seed issue, which is a bottleneck in so many places, which is a direct part of the agricultural innovation chain concept. And I think chains are critical, but they're only as strong as the weakest link. So we have to be mindful, and that's what I think we're hearing from our panelists here tonight. Kamil, no, I'm sorry. I think I meant to jump to you, Stella. Kamil, you have to wait. I apologize. Stella, Sofia just mentioned how larger companies can help here. And you come from a very large company, and I'm so glad you're here because, let's face it, folks, what's the research budget of Bayer? It's something like $2.5 billion last time I checked for the you can correct me, but it's a lot. We would be losing a big opportunity if we didn't work together as the public and private sector and the local private sector and the international private sector, as Sofia spoke about. So can you share with us some insights about how your company is pivoting itself or setting itself, situating itself to achieve some goals, and maybe say a little bit about some of those goals?
Sure, yes. Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you 2Blades, Bio, and USAID for having me. Thank you everyone in the room for joining us this evening. You could be eating a lovely dinner, but instead you're with us with cookies in the back. So thank you so much. Indeed, private sector is a whole nother beast. Before I came into private sector, I worked for the USDA, which was another kind of beast. But what's been really transparent that I've been seeing in the past few years that I've been working in this intersection between public and private, working in these public-private partnerships with Bayer involved and with donor funding, working with public sector, it's been truly interesting to see that indeed these CG centers, for example, have some of the most creative and innovative breeders. That's no doubt. The world as a CG breeder is an amazing set of opportunities, let's say that. They have to wear so many hats and entering in that world through partnerships. I'm glad to see Ronnie over here in the back, who's with IITA. We've been working with IITA since 2016, and I personally have been involved. And Ronnie, just the meeting that IITA had last week was by far a really great testimony to the combination of public and private, just the exposure of each other. I think what we saw at IITA is having the crop programs expose their own processes between crops, leveraging the insights that the maize program, for example, has learned, and seeing the other crops, the other opportunity crops, seeing what does that innovation chain look like with examples like what Mamatala have done for us. And so I'm going to bridge that example to a really great, successful partnership that we forged together, Rob, with regards to rice. I'm Filipina. I was born in the Philippines, and I grew up knowing rice is life. I still eat rice 3 times a day. And it's been a tremendous opportunity to work with ERIE and USAID on a project that we call Scale Direct. It's a climate-smart rice technology scaling initiative, trying really to learn and put some of the same aspects in place that Tella has shown. We are also actually going to be trying the product lifecycle management tool, because indeed the transparency in the seed system is so necessary, like you said, Rob, for all the players upstream and downstream the chain to understand what are those challenges that the end user is going to face is really critical. There's another approach that the CG centers have been promoting as well, that we're also doing in this partnership in Scale Direct, and it's called a tricot trialing. It's a bit of this, perspective of getting farmer preferences, farmer engagement in a seed system where they're telling us what they like. And they're actually making the selections alongside with us. And those market realities, coming back to research in that chain, is absolutely critical and necessary. Let me back up a little bit, though, around Scale Direct and how we got that started. Rob, I don't know if you remember the years and months of conversations that we had between our groups. And that was necessary because we really had to understand each other. We had to understand what was your priority, what were our priorities, and what are we willing to bring to the table, what can we bring to the table. And so landing on a project that brought to bear our regenerative ag strategy. So those of you heard from our head of biotech in the plenary earlier today, he spoke about our regenerative ag strategy, and direct seeded rice is a really good example for regenerative agriculture in the context of how the farming system is a new-ish system where there is water reductions. We are actually showing in the project a reduction of greenhouse gases in this new farming system, and so these are aspects that we want to see from a sustainability perspective, but also in turn we want to see the farmer engagement and the farmer return on investment. So looking forward to continuing the partnership. We are halfway into it, and hopefully more years to come. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Stella. And I just want to say the partnership Stella's referring to was part of AIM for Climate, one of the innovation sprints. And when you think about it, this was, not only is this reducing greenhouse gas emissions, it's saving water. You're not flooding the rice, you're irrigating it. It's saving energy associated with pumping and further reducing the greenhouse emissions. It's saving time and money. And it's, again, what came through, again, is what do farmers want? It's not about prescribing, telling people what to do. It's about listening and trying to match your innovations and your investments in R&D with what your customer wants. And I guess that would be the other piece of the private sector. I think they know what their customers want. They have to. And so we in the public sector, I think, can learn a lot, and we're delighted for these opportunities. Now, the other thing I wanted to just say is, this is a beautiful example of agricultural technology with an environmental and a climate benefit. And I think, Margaret, you mentioned agroecology and such, and so much of what we're talking about here is regenerative, is about using less resources, using less pesticide, getting higher rates of nutrient use efficiency or water use efficiency. So again, persistence and calm engagement, I think, especially with the agricultural community, will help win the day. But Kamil, you've worked on a really important technology, and that's the resistance to soybean rust. And USAID has invested a lot through our soy innovation labs and our partnerships with IITA on soy in Africa. We know soy is coming to Africa. How it comes matters, and we're trying to make sure that smallholder farmers have a stake in that. And yet, a lot of people who were thrilled at the money they're making, which is driving things like greater affordability of eggs and poultry and such, or fish, all of a sudden face this terrible outbreak of soybean rust in the last couple years. What's some of your thinking as someone involved at the upper end of that innovation development? What are some of the creative ways that we can try to make sure that these innovations don't bypass those people?
Yes, thank you. So 2Blades is a non-profit, so somewhere between we've been talking here. And we have this unique, we call dual market model, where we work on one hand with the commercial agriculture. We've been working with Bayer quite a lot for a number of years. And then we can also partner with other organizations who can benefit smallholders in developing countries, in Africa, for example, to bring these innovations, discoveries, and efficiencies for smallholder. And soybean and soybean rust is one of our major programs, flagship programs. And although Brazil is one of the biggest producers where there is a very good mechanization of soybean, good agronomy, good access to seeds, diseases are the major problem. And soybean rust is a major disease causing over $2 billion control of the soybean rust. So this is where 2Blades come. We partner across the innovation chain. We build number of partnerships. As an organization, we are based somewhere upstream of this innovation chain. We are not a fundamental organization doing discoveries, but we have partnered with fundamental organizations to benefit from the infrastructure and science they are doing. And then on the other hand, we partner with Bayer to deliver innovations for them. So for example, we clone a number of resistant genes initially for working with Corteva and then Bayer. And the genes which we cloned, the traits we discover are now being deployed in the fields in Brazil and making soybean resistant to soybean rust. And we also clone number of traits for Bayer, which also will help to deliver long-lasting, sustainable solution to soybean rust. So now we have the right to use these innovations, what we've learned, the efficiencies we also learn working with the companies for the benefit of smallholders. And soybean is becoming priority crop in many African countries. There is a huge demand, and there is a lot of work ongoing. There are many challenges, as you probably know. USAID has, through the Soybean Innovation Lab, done a fantastic job in improving seeds or mechanization. But the more soybean is being grown, the more acreage, the more challenges with disease. There is more disease can come and spread easily. And also we have additional challenges associated with climate change, which is potentiating the disease problem. So now what we've learned, what we've done with the working with commercial partners, now we can bring these innovations to Africa. We have partnered downstream with some other organizations, for example, with Calro or IITA, to have access to their germplasm, to their fields. And we can bring these traits and develop soybean resistant to soybean rust. So the smallholders can also benefit for the innovations. From the innovations we've done with working with commercial partners.
Wonderful. I think you've given us a great example of how the system can really work in ways that foster investment and innovation, but then also ensure that it reaches people who it might otherwise take a long time to get to or never reach at all. So that intentionality, we really appreciate that. And I think that's been a theme that's run through all our discussions tonight. So you've all had a chance to hear each other's perspectives. Some of you focused more on specific technology, some of you more on the context, the delivery models. Can I ask each of you to think about what's the missing link? I talked about chains, you know, can you say a little bit about where you think, what you would like to see from it can be any source. It could be development partners. It could be from policy makers in governments. It could be from partners in the private or public sector. But if there's, could I put you each on the spot to come up with maybe one or those two things that would help strengthen that chain? And who would like to start? Now, somebody should volunteer so I don't have to pick on somebody again. Oh, Stella.
Let me volunteer, Rob. Two things that we would like. Boy, I have four. You know, I'll pick on the last two. I'm not sure if I've heard it yet. You know, I heard it in the room. One of the things that's making our partnership super successful is this idea of blended capital. And you know, USAID is awarding the implementing partner, but BEAR is contributing in-kind support. And we're able to do that because this is part of our business strategy, direct seeded rice in India, for example. And so when we can come to something very specific like that, here's a product concept in a country of interest, then the ability to scale that, you know, leveraging the priorities of USAID, the project is in 6 countries, right? And I'll call out the 3 countries in Africa in particular, all 3 of them, Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, have a national rice development strategy. Those countries need to increase their local rice productivity because rice consumption has increased tremendously. Rice is the 3rd most important staple crop in sub-Saharan Africa, and the rise of imports are huge. And so how can we leverage the new technologies, the farmer producer organizations, the local service providers to help us in this systems approach, because we need all of them. And mobilizing them, we're there along with. We will help train, we will help the technical backstopping, supplying the network with, we're putting hybrid seed into this context, we're providing chemistry if and when we have it. Really looking at that systems approach and seeing where are all the players. Let's raise the transparency on that between the public and private and go. Go as quickly as possible. So blended capital, shared goals is key. The last thing I'll touch on, and I'm wearing this pin from AOCC. Alan Van Dyne pinned me today, only to remind me that talent in country is so critical. I was so pleased to have met one of our partners in Tanzania earlier this year, only to meet her again in Kenya a couple weeks ago. She was an AOCC grad. She did the CRISPR course. And so here's an example of a TARI, a national program breeder, who's breeding several crops, right? She's working with us on rice, doing greenhouse gas studies, and here she's now, you know, doing this training with African Orphan Crops Consortium to do CRISPR on a different crop, and that is talent developing in countries seen before our eyes, and it's wonderful, and we can support that.
I love that list. Thank you, Stella. So the blended capital, but embedded in that is a value proposition for the business partner. It's very critical. The National Variety Development Strategy, the policy, the context that provides the playing field. So we know what works and what doesn't work, what's legal, what's not. And then that human capital piece is so critical. So I'm going to jump to you now, Marc, because I feel like you've been working on a series of innovations within these kinds of contexts, and I wondered if you could say a bit more from your perspective about what needs to be strengthened, what's missing, what more needs to be done to help get us to the kind of impact that I know you want.
Yes, this project of developing late blight resistant potato for smallholder farmers started in 2008. We are in 2024, so 16 years after, and we, according to the way we see things developing, it will take another 2 years. So 18 years in total. That's the first issue. The second one is a couple of years ago, we did an assessment of how much would it cost to release one biotech potato in one developing country, and how much time would that take. We did an estimate based on real data that it would cost 1.5 million and take 8 years. So there is a big gap between what we estimated through that study and what the reality is. We spend more than $1.5 million. So my take on this is that if we would have taken from the day one sound product lifecycle framework, it would have increased the understanding on the side of the sponsor of the different phases we are going through, the different key criteria we need to meet in order to move from one stage to another. When some studies are key to be done in a certain phase before you jump into the next phase, so that we don't make mistake to jump too early in the next phase. We worked many years in Uganda, thinking that Uganda was going to be the country where we would have our first release. And suddenly the president changed his mind and refused to commercialize any GM crop. We took at least a year and a half before we really understood that this decision was not reversible. In a PLC, you would have taken this decision sooner. And I have a couple of examples like that indeed, if we would have adopted from day one a PLC approach, number one, the sponsor would have been probably more committed to a more long-term investment, and we wouldn't have this kind of situation where at some point in the project we were running out of money, and we were lucky to have the 2Blades Foundation that came in, and that was our savior at that time. So it has been a bit of a bumpy road in terms of the funding, but there has been also, the PLC is supposed to be a straight line. Ours was not at all a straight line. It has been more like a zigzag.
So, thank you, Marc. And I think you've helped blaze a trail, though. It's been a learning process, and of course, we are very much now trying to learn from our private sector counterparts. But as one of your partners in this, we've walked this together, and we've been trying to learn too. I have some of my colleagues in the room who are managing these projects, and so I think that learning somehow then we need to translate that. You're doing it from the standpoint of research management. I think others of us need to do it from the standpoint of the context, that helping to get the clarity and ideally evidence-based approaches, building capacity there. So, Margaret, let me turn back to you now in terms of the framing, but also coming back to the original question, what's missing for you? What are the one or two things that would really strengthen the key links in the value chain, the agri-innovation value chain that you are focusing on at ISAAA?
Yeah, thank you. So from where I sit and the lessons that we have learned, when it comes to the products, the choice of product, and the way the policymakers in Africa look at what is happening in this area of agricultural biotechnology, it does appear that if you're able to support public sector working together, for example, Bayer, Corteva, and by the way, we had a good visit yesterday in Corteva, and we were out by the level of investment and infrastructure, but we were also very encouraged to know that if we are able to partner with the private sector as the public sector, Kenyatta University, for example, Addis Ababa University is here, and demonstrate to our policymakers that the private sector can actually partner with the public sector to develop and deliver a product coming from the public sector, the national research or academic programs, it will be much easier from the policy point of view for them to really support. And that also attracts local private sector investment. So that's what I really want to see, that we are leveraging on the various capacities within our national research programs, enhancing them through the kind of support we are getting from the bigger industry players, so that we can get products that are coming from both the big companies and the smaller institutions and private sector. Number two, I would like to see a situation where we are supporting more of our young people coming from the universities. They're coming up with very creative ideas on how to harness biotechnology, for example, or other new breeding innovations, but then they lack the mentorship. And this mentorship can come from the private sector, for example, because we need to really cultivate this entrepreneurial mindset about how science can be a big business as well in Africa by delivering products, but it is going to be done by our young people. Africa has a very youthful population, and we are trying that through a project. We are working with USAID, the Feed the Future Striker Smart Sorghum project. We've started a platform called the Africa Bioscience Hub, the Afri Bio Hub, which is really a platform that we'd like to start nurturing these young people coming up with their ideas that can be developed into startups that where we can see Africa actually pioneering with the local private sector biotech companies. That will change the tide in terms of the policy support, in terms of the investments that we require, and very, very importantly, in terms of the perceptions that that people have held. The very long-standing negative perception will completely change if we show that it's our young people now who have been mentored, who are now the ones who are actually delivering products for farmers. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret, and I think you've brought us back to this idea of public-private sectors working together, but particularly in terms of generating a sense of ownership and a real stake for the partners, but also that public-private sector partnership also has a role to play in helping bring up the next generation of scientists. So that comes back to the point Stella made, but specifically looks to our private sector partners to think about how we can work together to do that. So I know my colleagues are listening. Sofia, AATF is sort of positioned in the midst of all this. You broker partnerships of various kinds. I don't want to limit you, but what are some of the key constraints that you'd like to see addressed, or the weaker links of the chain that would help AATF to prosper and make even more progress?
Yeah, so you know, there's not. Is this on? Yeah. There are not so many players, and everybody is working with the same players. Say, for example, seed companies or the value chain players. And I think they need to be more focused on strengthening the SMEs. You know, having. And there have been various studies that say that, you know, who grows the food is the small SMEs, actually, including, you know, the farmer and cooperatives, and they are struggling. So strengthening those would actually strengthen the whole innovation, but even the food system. So, you know, you talked about the weakest link. So we need to strengthen those who don't have usually so much focus and investment.
Any thoughts about how to do that?
I think it's a little bit about mentorship. It's a little bit about you know, do they get the right level of support for what they need? Is it sort of integrated? But even if we go even to the university systems, there's a lot of innovations in, for example, in Africa, in local institutions, African universities, that really doesn't really get attention. So how do we, how do they get also support in making those innovations come through? Also mentorship from the public sector and university.
So, in a sense, trying to strengthen and grow some of the pieces of the agricultural innovation chains that are not as prevalent and strong and robust and resilient as we'd like,
Yep.
with the prospect of then their being able to unlock the potential of the 80% of smallholders, the smallholders who produce 80% of the food in sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, great. Kamil, what about for you in terms of unleashing the innovations? You gave us some great examples of how you're reaching down. What could happen that would accelerate this or expand it, maybe to other diseases or to other traits? Or
Yeah, I can only highlight what others also said. I think being embedded in the organization, which is doing fundamental science, and we are somewhere downstream of this process on the proof of concept and moving towards product, there is lack of funding there. So you can see quite a lot of money going to fundamental science. You can apply for governmental grants. Working with fundamental science very often perceived to be better. But then when you want to scale it up, develop proof of concept, move it further, and make it bigger, work on other diseases is being less innovative, being seen by, less innovative. So it's really hard to bring money, bring funding to expand on these programs. I mean, there it's partnership with the industry and companies can help a lot, but it's one of the challenges, definitely. And
go ahead, please.
well, no, I just briefly wanted to mention the other one to what Margaret was talking is also training of next generation of leaders, right? In science, you had very good training for scientists, how to do PhD, be good scientists, how to be a postdoc, but then what happens next, right? Being a leader in the agri-tech sector, how to build on this, how to be entrepreneurship. And I seen it myself because I applied at some point for a job to a breeding company, and they look at my CV. Oh, you are a fantastic scientist, but what do you want from us? You know nothing about finances, nothing about leading the project. You can do science in the lab and pipette, but we don't need you. So this is what also 2Blades recognized, and we developed this program called Masterclass, where people learn not only how to be scientists, they learn at the institution, but we teach people how to be leaders, how to be entrepreneurs, and this is really bringing a lot of useful knowledge and skills.
That's very helpful, and I think you also hit on the point Sofia was raising in terms of these skills that are essential for these different links in the chains. You know, we're just about out of time. It's a Tuesday night. We've got a wonderful audience. I hate to not give anybody a chance to ask like a 30-second question, but I mean, you have to be disciplined, okay? No lectures. Don't be garrulous like me. The gentleman at the back, and does somebody have a mic to hand him? Can you take one of these? Somebody take it. Please introduce yourself.
All right. My name is Joseph Ulasi from the most populous black country in the world, Nigeria. I'm pursuing my PhD at Michigan State University in plant breeding, genetics and biotechnology, and I'm into potato breeding. So Dr. Marc, you have sent an email to my boss, Dave Dauchis, and this is Joseph. Nice meeting you. So 2 quick questions. First, Nigeria, for instance, has a potato production capacity of 3.4 tons per hectare. Meanwhile, the global average of potato production is 21 tons per hectare. So I'm directing this question to Dr. Marc. What can we do to upscale our production of potato in Nigeria, vis-a-vis the 3R gene potato production you are trying to incorporate into the Nigerian potato industry? Secondly, there is this communication gap that exists whenever a smallholder farmer hears about GMO. The first impression he or she has is a negative technology, something not to hear about and all of those. What are we doing, talking about Dr. Margaret now, to change the narrative, to help them embrace this biotech technology? So I want you to...
Thank you. So Marc, first to you and then to you, Margaret.
Could you help me on the question?
How do we get the yield gap to narrow from 3 or 4 tons per hectare to 20 or more? There's a huge yield gap in sub-Saharan Africa.
Well, the seed. Basically, the seed is responsible for a large part of the yield gap. But unfortunately, the seed is also the most difficult system to improve. As I mentioned, you have in Africa between less than 1% to maximum 3% of the total seed of potato that are planted that are certified seed. So that are seed produced by seed growers with a certification scheme which ensure that the seed have less than X% of pathogens. 99% of the seeds are planted from farmer-safe seeds or seeds grown by neighbors or seeds from the markets. So to close that gap, it's not going to happen from one day to another. It's not going to happen with a marvelous innovation. It will be a process that will take a long time. With late blight, we have a gap. In Kenya, we did a survey. We have a gap of 23% in production that is being destroyed by late blight. So at least we know that if there is a massive adoption of late blight resistant potato, there will be a productivity increase. But it's nothing compared to the problem of the seed being planted by farmers, which have a huge pathogen load. Over time, hopefully with the better resistance to late blight, to virus disease, and to bacterial wilt, there will be less, the farmer-safe seed will actually have better quality. That's the progress, but it will take time, unfortunately.
Margaret, before I give it to you, I just want to say, I think, Marc, you've hit on something there about the bundling of innovations. They don't stand in isolation. Agronomy, crop protection, good seed that does not have a burden of diseases, so critical in clonal crops. Other things, agronomy, markets that function, that produce post-harvest losses because they're efficient. So we have to think as a system, I think, that's clear. Margaret, on the second question.
Yeah, the negative perceptions. There's nothing as convincing as the story of a farmer. And so the more we have good products, GM products with farmers, the more it's going to be easier for us to manage the negative perception, because farmers don't lie. If the seed is good, if the crop is good, then the farmers will tell their story. So from a communication perspective, we need to change now from the hero being the scientist, because we've had a lot of scientists explaining about the process of genetically engineering or genetically editing a crop. But that is creating more fear. And when you ask the farmer just asks about the bottom line. Are you bringing me a product that will save my inputs, my time, that will get me better product for the market or even for the family? And so in Africa now we are seeing more products. Now we have 5 GM products. We have soybean, we have maize, corn, we have cowpea now, very, very important crop being adopted in West Africa, in Nigeria, Ghana, and Burkina Faso is coming soon. We have cotton, and in Kenya, we already have national performance trials of genetically modified cassava, another very important crop grown by small-scale farmers. And once the farmers get access to the biotech seed or the biotech product, the game is done. Because then if you have any doubts, ask the farmer who is growing the crop.
So seeing is believing. You know, I had to laugh when you said gene editing was making it worse in terms of the perceptions, because here in a room like this, everybody gets excited about the next technology and the newest techniques, but maybe not. We're not the focus group that's representative of the larger population. There's another hand up. Diana, you're the arbiter of these things. Okay, the gentleman sitting, please introduce yourself and please be brief.
Thank you. My name is Kingsley from Iowa State University, studying mechanical engineering, and from the most populous country, Nigeria. So I just want to ask, yeah, we've been talking about innovation chain for agriculture, how we want to optimize or private sectors making this making this very efficient for us. We've talked about problems that I see that has been existing in the past 10 years, 20 years maybe. Policies. I mean, a particular set of government comes in, they set their policy to help us. 4 years' time, they're out of office. New government comes in, new policy. This is a problem that's been existing. Also, investment, mentorship. I mean, there's a lot of very super ideas that we can use to curb efficiencies. However, I'm trying to ask to see if there are more realistic ideas or thoughts the panelists think that we as individuals or stakeholders can help actually to help the private sectors and boost the innovation chain. I mean, in essence, a summary towards more realistic ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. So who would like to tackle that? Stella, and then maybe our other two colleagues who haven't spoken yet, and then we'll wrap it up.
Thank you so much for the question. I'll get down to the nitty-gritty of real things that we were supporting IITA in taking up. So IITA is in Nigeria. You should go visit and see how they've started to implement some of these new processes. Mechanization, for example. We donated one planter to the SIL program ages ago. And that has really changed the game for that program. You know, when a process of planting used to take weeks, is now taking 3 days. Similarly, we've donated seed threshers. Again, a process that takes weeks. I don't know if you've seen cowpea threshed, group of women in a circle pounding on them with sticks, right? And so taking that process into mechanization, making sure that the ES and H, the environmental, safe, and health stuff is in place, right? A lot of safety stuff is needed for mechanization. That is a real, tangible, important aspect of private sector efficiencies. In addition, some of the things that we did with IITA Year 1, SOPs, harmonizing the SOPs, Ronnie's smiling, between the CG programs and the national programs. I mean, they make decisions together. Are they actually scoring the plants in the same rating scale? What we found is no, they were not. So harmonizing these SOPs across those programs, across the link, if you will. And then also another thing that I think was critically important, you're in plant breeding, and so you know very much the breeder's equation and genetic gain. We often see these large error studies with these programs. But how are we seeing the gain year after year, looking at the pipeline as a cohort? We helped IITA implement this new way of looking at the value that the breeding programs are bringing to the table, and I think that's a step in the right direction. Thank you.
No, I'm just going to repeat what I said also earlier. In terms of practical, I think it's also the way you stop things that are not working and be more critical in what you focus your efforts on. And is this going to work? Is this? But also looking at the value. So immediately for the farmer, and then, you know, if it doesn't make sense, if it's not going to work, then stop. And be brave to take those decisions in these, discussions.
I'm actually very encouraged by both these comments because I think it shows that there's some low-hanging fruit out there, right? That we can do better. That came up earlier too, I think, in Marc's comments. Kamil, I think you're our cleanup batter tonight. Do you know that expression? I don't have a cricket analogy for you in the UK, but anyway.
I can only add, we haven't talked about capacity building and workforce training, right? So we also, as an organization, we had a lab in the early based in the past where we can work with local scientists, train them and bring technologies and innovation to them and help them this way with the training.
Right. Thank you so much. I think that's a very important theme. So look, I think we're over time. You've been a fantastic audience to stay and be patient and be focused. I think there's easy explanation for that is our fantastic panel, and please join me in thanking And then I want to just say, and I'll give it to you, Diana, to close, but I just want to remind us all that in this climate change challenged crisis that we're in, all the issues that we heard about today matter that much more. How fast we can innovate, how fast we can get innovations into the field, how fast we can replace them as pests and diseases catch up to them. All of these are critical, and it's not just for food security and agriculture, it's for our global objectives around conserving tropical forests, watersheds, biodiversity. So, the agricultural and the environmental communities need to come together, and science and using biology, solar-powered biology is one of the most beautiful ways that we can do that, and I think we heard a lot of great examples of that this evening. So thank you all very much, and back to our host and 2Blades leader, Diana Horvath.
Rob, thank you so much, and I want to thank all the panelists and really note that what we've been hearing tonight are really pioneers on this path, and I personally am extremely optimistic about the lessons that we're learning, creating best practices to move forward more efficiently with each step as we go. And I feel that this process will continue to move faster, deliver innovations, and put them into the hands where they're really needed. So I just want to say thank you to this great group of people who are fighting this fight every day and sharing your learnings with us. Thank you.